Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. A subscriber sent me a story about his night shift at a warehouse in a quiet town. A job that should have been simple, but what he experienced there was anything but normal. He thought he could escape, but some places don't let you go so easily. Hey, I don't know if you'll believe me. I don't even know if I believe it myself, but I have to tell someone. I have to get it out. My name is Mark, and I work as a night security guard at a warehouse outside of town. It's a boring job, just me, a chair, a bank of monitors, and a whole lot of silence. Nothing ever happens here. At least it didn't. I think something is wrong with this place. It started about 2 weeks ago. I was sitting in the security office, watching the monitors, when I noticed something weird on one of the screens. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a dark smudge near the old storage racks in Sector 6. The cameras are old, and the lighting in this place is terrible, so I didn't think much of it. But the smudge didn't go away. I stared at it for a while, trying to figure out what it was. Then I realized it was shaped like a person. Not a clear image, just a tall, unmoving shadow. No features, no details, just standing there. I figured it was a trick of the light, or maybe some equipment casting a weird shadow, but something about it bothered me. It fell off. So, I grabbed my flashlight and went to check it out. Sector 6 is in the far back of the warehouse, past rows of metal shelves stacked high with boxes. I made it there in under a minute, and nothing. The spot where I'd seen the shadow was completely empty. I waved my flashlight around, checked behind the racks, even looked up at the ceiling in case there was a leak causing some weird reflection. But there was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things, that the cameras were just glitching. But when I got back to my office, I checked the monitor again. The shadow was back, standing in the exact same place. I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. The warehouse was completely silent except for the faint hum of the lights, but I swear I started to feel something, like I wasn't alone. I shook it off and forced myself to focus. Maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was a coat rack or a piece of equipment I hadn't noticed. The next night I checked again. The shadow was there. Same place, same shape. I watched it longer this time. The longer I looked, the more uneasy I felt. I didn't like it. It wasn't moving, but something about it made my skin crawl. So, once again, I went to check. And once again, there was nothing there. But this time, something was different. Some of the boxes had moved. Not a lot, just slightly out of place. A few inches here, a few inches there. Subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I checked the footage to see if maybe another worker had come in and moved them. But there was nothing. The only thing I saw was that shadow standing there the whole time. At this point, I started thinking maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe a coworker had found a way to sneak in and screw with me. But that didn't make sense. The warehouse is locked up tight at night. The only way in or out is through the front entrance, and I have the only key. The cameras cover every corner of the building. There's nowhere for someone to hide. Still, I started keeping track of things. Every night, I checked the same spot. And every night, the shadow was there. Then, 3 nights ago, something changed. I was watching the monitors like usual when the screen flickered. Just for a second. When the static cleared, the figure was gone. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to come back. Nothing. Then my radio crackled. At first, I thought it was just interference, but then I heard it. A voice. Faint, distorted, barely more than a whisper. Hello. It was so quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. I grabbed the radio and pressed the button. Who is this? Nothing. Just static. I didn't check Sector 6 that night. I told my boss about it the next day. About the figure on the cameras, about the radio. He just laughed. You're probably just tired, man. The night shifts mess with your head. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just seeing things. But I don't think so. Because last night, when I checked the cameras again, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The figure was still in Sector 6, still standing there, motionless. But this time, it wasn't facing the camera anymore. It was turned slightly, like it was looking at something else, like it was looking at me. I don't know why I came back from my shift tonight. I told myself that after what I saw yesterday, I'd quit. Just walk out and never look back. But when my alarm went off, I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove to the warehouse like nothing was wrong. I guess part of me needed to be sure. Maybe I thought I was losing it, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I clocked in and went straight to the security office. The first thing I did was check the monitors. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to look. The shadow was there, still in Sector 6. But it wasn't the same. Before, it had just been a dark shape, still and featureless. A shadow, a glitch, something my brain could dismiss. But tonight it looked different. It was sharper, more defined. I could almost see the outline of shoulders, arms, and I swear it was standing closer to the camera than before. The longer I stared, the worse the feeling in my stomach got. It was like the air in the office had thickened, like something was pressing down on my chest. I should have looked away, but I didn't. I leaned in closer to the screen, squinting, trying to see it more clearly, and then the monitor flickered. Not like before. This time, it wasn't a brief static glitch. The entire row of screens shook violently, lines of white and black distorting the images. I pushed back from the desk, my heart hammering. Then, for just a split second, the screen showed something else. Not the warehouse, not Sector 6. A face. I didn't see it clearly. It was just a flash, barely more than an impression. But I saw enough. It wasn't a normal face. It was wrong, stretched, twisted. The eyes were too deep, too hollow. The mouth was, I don't know. I don't want to remember. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the flickering stopped. The screens returned to normal. Sector 6 was back. The shadow was standing there again, motionless. But now I felt something else. I wasn't just looking at it. It was looking at me. I jumped up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My breathing was too fast, too shaky. I grabbed my flashlight and forced myself to go check. It didn't matter that I knew what would happen, that I'd get there and find nothing like every other night. I had to do it anyway. My footsteps echoed as I made my way through the warehouse. The further I walked, the heavier the air felt, like I was wading through something thick and invisible. By the time I reached Sector 6, I already knew I wouldn't find anything. And I was right. The racks, the shelves, the boxes, everything was where it should be. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. But something was different this time. The silence. I know that sounds stupid. Of course, it was quiet. It was the middle of the night in an empty warehouse. But this wasn't normal silence. It was too quiet. No humming lights. No distant creaks of the metal shelving settling. No faint buzzing from the security cameras. It was absolute, like sound itself had been sucked out of the air. I turned in a slow circle, my flashlight beam bouncing off metal and cardboard. Then, behind me, a sound. Soft, faint, like fabric shifting. I spun around so fast I nearly tripped. My flashlight flickered as I pointed it in every direction. Nothing. But that smell was back. Old, damp wood. Stale air. I don't even remember leaving. 1 second I was standing there, and the next I was in the security office slamming the door shut behind me. I don't know how long I sat there, trying to catch my breath. My hands were cold, but my skin was damp with sweat. I didn't check the cameras again for the rest of my shift. I just sat there, counting down the minutes until my replacement showed up. I should have quit right then and there, but I didn't. And I think whatever's in this warehouse knows that. Because tonight, when I got to work, the shadow wasn't in Sector 6 anymore. It was closer, 2 halls away from my office. And this time, I think it's waiting for me to notice. I don't know how to explain this, but the warehouse feels different now. I don't mean in a vague, spooky way. I mean something is wrong with it. Like the place itself has changed. Or maybe I have. I walked in tonight feeling like I was stepping into something else. The air was colder than usual. The rows of shelves felt taller, the aisles narrower. The lights seemed dimmer, even though I know they haven't been changed. I didn't even go to the security office right away. I just stood near the entrance for a while listening. The warehouse is always quiet at night, but tonight it was too quiet. Like last night in Sector 6, the silence felt unnatural. I finally forced myself to move. I walked the floor, doing my usual rounds, but it didn't feel like my usual routine. It felt like I was walking through a place I'd never been before. The aisles seemed longer than they should be. The racks seemed closer together. And every time I turned a corner, I had this horrible feeling, like something had just moved out of my sight. By the time I made it to the security office, my nerves were already shot. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I don't usually do that, but tonight I needed to. Then I turned to the monitors, and I saw it. The shadow wasn't in Sector 6 anymore. It had moved again. Last night, it had been 2 aisles away from my office. Now it was 1 aisle away. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just getting closer, it was doing it deliberately. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. The figure still wasn't moving, but it felt different now. Not just a shadow, not just a shape. There was weight to it, like it wasn't just standing there. It was waiting. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. My mind was screaming at me to look away, but I couldn't. Then, the lights flickered. Not the monitors, the warehouse lights. A split-second blackout. When they came back on, the shadow was gone. I sucked in a breath, so fast it hurt my chest. I frantically checked the other cameras, scanning every aisle. Nothing. It had disappeared, but that didn't make me feel better, because I knew somehow it wasn't gone. It was somewhere closer, maybe right outside my door. I sat completely still listening. At first, there was nothing. Then, a sound, soft, barely there. Footsteps, slow, steady. They weren't coming from the monitors. They were coming from inside the warehouse, right outside my office. I clenched my fist to keep them from shaking. My breathing was shallow, too fast. I stared at the door, half expecting it to move. It didn't. The footsteps stopped. Then, after a few unbearable seconds, knock. Just one. Soft, almost hesitant. I stopped breathing. My mind went blank. I didn't move, didn't blink. Just sat there, frozen. Nothing happened. No second knock. No movement. Just silence. I don't know how long I waited before I finally stood up. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I stepped toward the door, moving like I was underwater. My fingers hovered over the handle. Then my radio crackled. A deep, static-filled whisper. "Let me in." I staggered back, so fast I nearly tripped over my chair. My heart was hammering in my chest. The radio fell from my shaking hands, hissing with static. I didn't touch the door. I didn't open it. I just sat back down and waited for my shift to end. I don't care what my boss says. I don't care if I lose my job. Tomorrow is my last shift. I just have to get through one more night. And then I'm leaving this place forever. I have to, because I know something now. That shadow, it's not just standing there anymore. It's coming for me. I shouldn't have come back tonight. I told myself this was my last shift, that I just had to get through a few more hours, and then I'd be done with this place forever. But I made a mistake. I let my guard down, and now I know it's watching me. When I walked into the warehouse tonight, I already felt sick. The air was heavy, thick, like the entire building was pressing down on me. I had a headache before I even reached the security office. I told myself I wouldn't check the cameras. If I didn't look, if I didn't acknowledge it, maybe I could pretend it wasn't there. That lasted about 10 minutes. The silence was worse than looking, so I turned on the monitors, and I regretted it immediately, because the shadow was gone. It wasn't in Sector 6. It wasn't in any of the usual places. I flipped through the cameras, my hands clammy against the keyboard. My pulse pounded in my ears. Aisle 1, empty. Aisle 2, empty. Aisle 3, empty. Where is it? I kept clicking through the feeds, faster and faster. The longer I searched, the worse the feeling in my stomach got. Then, a flicker. One of the cameras glitched for just a second. Then another. The screens flashed with static, skipping through images faster than I could process. And then, suddenly it was there. The shadowy figure. Right outside the security office. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. It was standing directly in front of the camera, facing the door. Not moving. Not leaving. Just standing there. The monitors flickered again. And it was closer. I backed away from the desk, shaking my head. No, this isn't real. I grabbed my flashlight and, for some stupid reason, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air was ice cold. And the moment I stepped outside, I knew I was being watched. I don't remember making the decision to walk, but my feet started moving. I don't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from that office. As I walked, I felt it, that horrible, suffocating presence. I wasn't alone. It wasn't just an empty warehouse anymore. Something else was in here with me. I turned a corner and nearly screamed. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, disappearing behind a stack of boxes. I aimed my flashlight, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Nothing, but I knew it was there. I took another step forward, and that's when I heard it. A whisper. Low. Faint. Like someone standing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the air, it felt wrong. Like something had just moved. Then a sound. A clicking noise. That same awful, rhythmic clicking like someone tapping their tongue against their teeth. It was right behind me. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. I just ran. Through the aisles. Past the endless rows of shelves, my footsteps pounding against the concrete floor. The clicking followed me. Not fast, not rushed, slow, deliberate. Like whatever it was new, I couldn't escape. I reached the security office and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it. I grabbed the monitor controls and flipped through the cameras again, trying to see where it was. Nothing. It was gone. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screens. My breathing finally slowed. My hands stopped shaking. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I just panicked. Maybe the lights went out. The entire warehouse went black. The monitors flickered once. And then, in the darkness of the screen, I saw it. A reflection. Not my own. Standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the reflection on the monitor. The shape behind me wasn't clear, but it was there. Tall, dark, motionless. And then it moved. Not a normal movement. Not a step, not a shift. A glitch. Like a camera feed skipping frames. 1 second, it was a few feet behind me. The next, it was closer. My breath caught in my throat. The monitors flickered again. The reflection was gone. I couldn't breathe. My heart was slamming against my ribs. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head, just enough to see over my shoulder. Nothing. The room was empty. I shot up from my chair, knocking it over. My skin was ice cold, my hands shaking. I grabbed my flashlight and backed up against the desk. The office suddenly felt smaller. I forced myself to check the monitors again. I clicked through the camera feeds one by one, praying that the figure was back in its usual place, far away in Sector 6, where it belonged. But it wasn't. It wasn't in Sector 6. It wasn't in the aisles. It wasn't near the entrance. It wasn't anywhere. That was worse. I would have preferred to see it standing there in the distance, just watching like before. But it wasn't on the cameras anymore. That meant it was here, with me, somewhere. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screens, waiting for something to move. Then, footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, slow, measured, coming from outside the office. I turned off my flashlight. My fingers hovered over the lock on the door. The footsteps stopped. Then, just outside, a whisper. I didn't hear words, just a sound, a low, dragging breath, like someone standing right on the other side of the door. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the desk, trying to convince myself this wasn't happening. Then, the doorknob turned. I nearly bolted. I wanted to run. I wanted to push the desk in front of the door, to do anything but stand there like an idiot. But I couldn't move. The knob twisted slowly, like whoever or whatever was on the other side knew I was standing there, like it was waiting for me to react. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I heard a soft tap, like a finger pressing against the door. Then another, a slow, rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. Then, silence. The presence outside the door was gone, or at least it wanted me to think it was. I don't remember how long I stood there, waiting. It felt like forever. I forced myself to check the monitors again, praying I'd see it back in Sector 6. I clicked through the feeds. Nothing. Nothing. Then, there it was. But it wasn't in Sector 6. It wasn't even near the office anymore. It was by the entrance, standing right next to the only way out. I swallowed hard. It was blocking the exit. And then, it turned its head. I swear to God, for the first time, it was looking directly into the camera, looking at me. I don't think this place is the same anymore. I don't mean that in some deep, philosophical way. I mean it literally feels different, like the building itself is shifting. I don't know how to explain it, but I know I'm not imagining things. After last night, after seeing that thing standing near the entrance, I told myself I wasn't coming back. But I did. I don't even know why. It's like some part of me had to. Like this place wasn't done with me yet. I kept telling myself that all I had to do was finish this last shift, keep my head down, and then I'd leave for good. But when I walked in tonight, I felt it instantly. Something had changed. The first thing I noticed was the lights. They seemed dimmer. Not flickering, not broken, just wrong. Like the bulbs were weaker. Or like they weren't reaching as far as they should. The shadows between the racks seemed longer. Darker. Like they could swallow me whole if I got too close. The second thing I noticed was the layout. I know this warehouse. I've walked these aisles 1,000 times. I could navigate them in my sleep. But tonight, everything felt off. Like the rows were stretched further apart. Like the aisles were longer than they should be. Like no matter how far I walked, I wasn't getting any closer to my office. At first, I thought I was just exhausted. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I turned a corner and stopped cold. Because the security office, it wasn't there. It should have been right in front of me. I knew I had walked the right way. But the hallway just kept going, longer than it should be. Too long. And suddenly, I felt something I haven't felt since I was a kid. That creeping, awful feeling you get when you realize you're lost. Only this wasn't just being lost. The warehouse had changed around me. I turned around, trying to retrace my steps. That's when I heard it. A footstep. Not mine. Someone else's. Somewhere in the distance. A slow, deliberate step. Then another. And another. Coming closer. I turned in a slow circle, shining my flashlight into the dark aisles. Nothing. The footsteps stopped, but that didn't make me feel any better, because now I had the worst feeling I'd ever had in my life. Like I had just stepped into someone else's space. Like I wasn't supposed to be here. Like something was watching me. I forced myself to move. I needed to get back to the office. I turned another corner, and there it was, right where it should have been. Like it had always been there. Like the warehouse had just let me find it again. I practically ran inside and slammed the door behind me. I locked it, sat down, tried to breathe, tried to tell myself that none of this was real. But when I looked at the monitors, the figure was back, and it was closer than ever. This time, it was standing in an aisle I had just walked through. I know for a fact it wasn't there when I passed. But now, on the screen, it was standing right in the middle of the path. Like it had been there the whole time. Like it had watched me walk past it. Like it had been waiting. And then, the cameras flickered. When they came back, my stomach dropped. It had moved again. Not by much, but enough. Enough for me to know it was getting closer. And for the first time, I realized something. It's not just watching me. It's learning me. It's playing with me. And the worst part? I don't think I can leave anymore. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I thought I had one more shift left. One more night. And I'd be free of this place. But now, I don't think it's going to let me go. Because tonight, it got inside. After what happened last night, I was already on edge. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the way the warehouse changed around me. The way the figure kept moving closer. When I walked in tonight, I didn't even bother checking the aisles. I went straight to the office and locked the door. I told myself I wouldn't check the cameras. I told myself that if I just kept my head down, ignored it, it would go away. But that was a lie. It doesn't go away. The first 2 hours were quiet. Too quiet. I sat at my desk, hands gripping my knees, staring at the blank monitors. I kept telling myself I wouldn't turn them on, that I didn't need to see. But then, the radio crackled. I jumped, my breath catching in my throat. The static was soft at first, then louder. I reached for the radio, my fingers hesitating over the button. Then, a voice. Not clear, not normal. A low whisper, stretched and distorted. At first, I couldn't make out the words. Then, just before the static cut off, I heard it. You left the door open. My stomach dropped. I spun in my chair so fast I almost knocked over my desk. The door was still locked. I checked it 3 times, pulling on the handle, running my hand over the frame. It was shut. It was locked. But then, the lights flickered, and I saw it. The reflection. On the dark monitor screen. It was faint, just a smudge of shadow behind me. But it was there, inside the office. With me. I turned around so fast I almost fell. Nothing. Just my chair, my desk, the walls. But the feeling didn't go away. The air felt heavier, like something was still standing behind me, just out of sight. I sat back down, my hands gripping the arms of my chair, so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't check the monitors. I didn't turn on the radio. I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to breathe. And then, the chair next to mine moved. Just a little. Just enough. A slow scrape of metal against the floor. Like someone had just sat down. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Minutes. Hours. Time doesn't feel real in this place anymore. But at some point, I forced myself to move. I turned the monitors on, and I saw something that made my skin crawl. The figure wasn't on the cameras anymore. Not in the aisles. Not by the entrance. Not in Sector 6. Now it was in the office. Standing behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't move. I just watched the screen as my own reflection sat frozen in the chair. And behind me, the shadow loomed. Then the monitors glitched. A flash of static. When the screen cleared, it was closer. Another flicker. Closer. Another. And then, right next to me, the lights in the office went out. The radio crackled again. That same, stretched whisper. This time, I understood the words. I see you now. I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door, but suddenly I was in the hallway, sprinting down the aisles. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. The whole warehouse felt wrong. Bigger. Darker. Like the walls had shifted again, stretching the aisles into endless tunnels. I ran and ran, turning corners, trying to find my way out. Then up ahead, I saw a movement. A shadow, not standing still this time, walking toward me. I turned and ran the other way. The clicking noise followed. Slow, patient. like it knew I had nowhere to go. I made it to the break room and slammed the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock it. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No whispering. Just silence. I don't know how long I stayed in there. But eventually, I checked my watch. My shift was almost over. The sun would be rising soon. I didn't leave the break room until I heard my replacement arrive. I walked past him without saying a word. I didn't even clock out. I just left. I don't care if they fire me. I don't care if I never get another job. Because after tonight, I'm never coming back to this place. I left. I walked out of that warehouse without looking back. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove. I didn't think. I didn't check my phone. I just focused on the road, on putting as much distance between me and that place as possible. I told myself it was over. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Because I don't think it is going to let me leave. I got home just as the sun was coming up. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. For about 5 minutes. Then, as I stepped inside my apartment, I noticed something. The air felt wrong. Not cold, not heavy, just off. Like the space around me wasn't quite the same as I left it. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding, scanning the room. Everything looked normal. My couch, my TV, my kitchen light still on, just like I had left it. But something felt different. I walked through the apartment slowly, checking every room. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. But the feeling wouldn't go away. That feeling of being watched. That feeling I'd had every night in the warehouse. Like something was standing just outside my vision. I shook it off, told myself it was paranoia, that my mind was still stuck in that place, still playing tricks on me. But then, my radio crackled. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, right where I'd tossed it after leaving work. The sound was soft, barely noticeable, but I knew what it was. That familiar static. The same noise I'd heard in the warehouse. I froze. I hadn't touched it, hadn't turned it on, but now, the static was growing louder. I took a slow step forward, then another. My hand hovered over the radio, hesitation twisting my stomach into knots. And then, right as I reached for it, a voice. Soft, faint, distorted. Did you think you could leave? I grabbed the radio and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and went silent. But the damage was done. Because now I knew. The warehouse wasn't the only place it could reach me. It had followed me home. I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch. Every light in my apartment turned on, staring at nothing. Listening. Waiting. But nothing else happened. No more whispers. No more static. By morning, I almost convinced myself it was just my imagination. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my boss. You left your shift early. You need to come in tonight? I stared at the screen, my whole body tensed. No, I wasn't going back. I was done. I typed out my response. Short, simple. I quit. I hit send. A few seconds later, another message came through. You can't. I frowned. I started typing again, but then another message. You never clocked out. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't clocked out. I had just walked out, but something about that message felt off, like it wasn't really from my boss. I tried calling him. No answer. I checked the warehouse's website. No listing for night security jobs. No phone number that matched the one texting me. Like the job never existed. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Then, before I could even process what was happening, another text. No words this time. Just a photo. I didn't want to open it. I knew what it was before I even looked, but I did anyway. The image loaded. It was a screenshot of the warehouse cameras. A view of the security office. The monitors were on, and sitting in the chair was me. I dropped my phone. No, that wasn't possible. I wasn't there. I was home. I scrambled to grab my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The photo was still there. The timestamp was from right now. Then, another text. You forgot to clock out. My heart pounded. Then another image. Same view. Same office. But now, the shadow was standing behind the chair. Behind me. Watching. Waiting. And then, my lights went out. The lights went out. I sat in total darkness, my phone still in my hand, my breathing loud in the silence. I didn't move. I didn't even blink, because I knew I wasn't alone. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. Seconds? Minutes? The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then a sound, a slow, dragging noise. Not from outside, not from the hallway, from inside my apartment. Something was in here with me, something that shouldn't be. I gripped my phone so tight my fingers ached. The screen was still lit up, the last text staring back at me. You forgot to clock out. My stomach twisted. Then, another sound. Soft, barely there. Breathing. Not mine. Coming from the corner of the room. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. The air was thick, wrong, like something heavy was pressing against my chest. I forced myself to move, to turn on my phone's flashlight. The weak glow barely lit the space in front of me, but it was enough. Enough to see that the corner of the room wasn't empty anymore. There was a shadow standing there, tall, unmoving, watching me. I sucked in a shaky breath, my pulse roaring in my ears. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew if I turned my back, it would move, and I didn't want to see it move. I don't know how long we sat like that, me staring at it, it staring back. Then my phone buzzed. A text. I flinched at the sound, my whole body jolting. My thumb hovered over the screen, too afraid to look, but I did, and I wish I hadn't, because the message was only one word. Run. The second I read it, the light from my phone flickered. Then the figure moved. Not a step, not a shift. It glitched, like a broken frame in a video. 1 second it was in the corner. The next, it was closer. I threw my phone and bolted. I didn't think. I just ran. Straight through the apartment, past the dark shapes of my furniture, my heart hammering in my chest. The air behind me felt thick, heavy, wrong. I reached the front door, fumbled with the lock, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn it. I could feel it behind me, not touching me, but close, too close. I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the hallway. Then I turned around, and my stomach dropped, because the apartment was empty. No shadow, no breathing, nothing, like it had never been there at all. I ran down the stairs, through the front door, into the street. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away. Then I stood there, shaking, staring at my dark apartment building. And I realized something. It didn't want me to run. It let me run, because it knew I have nowhere to go. I checked my phone. Another message was waiting. No words this time, just an image. A new screenshot from the warehouse cameras. The office, the chair, and me sitting in it, head down, still, like I had never left, like I had never escaped at all. I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't. I walked for hours, aimless, my phone still clutched in my hand. I kept checking the last message, hoping, praying that I had imagined it. But it was still there. That screenshot. Me, sitting in the security office at the warehouse. Even though I knew I wasn't there. At least, I thought I wasn't. By the time the sun came up, I had convinced myself of one thing. I needed answers. I needed to go back. Not to work. Not to my boss. To the warehouse. I needed to see it for myself. See if it was still waiting for me. I took my time getting there. I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the building from the parking lot. The place looked normal. The morning shift workers were already inside, going about their day like nothing was wrong. Like none of them had ever seen what I had seen. but something still felt off, like the building knew I was there, like it was waiting. I swallowed my fear, gripped the wheel tighter. Then, finally, I forced myself to move. I walked through the front doors, and the moment I stepped inside, everything felt wrong. The warehouse was busy. Forklifts beeped. Workers talked. Machines hummed, but it didn't feel real. The air still carried that heavy, suffocating feeling. The same weight that had followed me home. And worse, nobody noticed me. I walked past my co-workers, people I had worked with for months. None of them looked at me. None of them even seemed to see me. I was standing in the middle of everything, and I might as well have been a ghost. Or maybe I already was. I didn't stop to talk to anyone. I had one goal. I had to see the security office. I walked straight through the warehouse, my steps quick, my breath shallow. I didn't let myself think. Then finally, I reached the door. I grabbed the handle, and for the first time in my life, I hesitated because I knew something was behind that door, something I shouldn't open it for. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I opened the door. The office was dark. The monitors were on, and I was in the chair. I felt the air leave my lungs, because it was me, my own back, my own head, tilted slightly down, staring at the screens. But I was here, standing in the doorway, not sitting there, not where I should be. I felt a cold, creeping horror slither through my chest. What was I looking at? What was sitting in my chair? Then, slowly, it turned its head, and I saw its face, and it saw me. It wasn't me. It had my shape, my posture, my clothes, but the face wasn't mine. It was stretched, wrong. The mouth was too wide. The eyes were too deep, like it had tried to copy me, but got it wrong. And then, it spoke, not with its mouth, not in a normal voice, but through the radio on the desk. A low, crackling whisper. It said one thing, one terrible thing: stay. I ran. I don't remember moving. 1 second I was staring at that thing in my chair. The next I was outside, panting, shaking, cold. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't going back. I wasn't ever going back, because I knew what it was trying to do. It wanted me to stay. It wanted to replace me. And if I stayed one more night, it would. I should have left town. I should have packed my things and never looked back. But I didn't, because something wouldn't let me. I spent the rest of the day in my car, parked miles away from the warehouse, staring at my phone. I didn't check my messages. I didn't check the time. I just sat there, replaying everything in my head. The figure, the voice, the thing wearing my shape. And the worst part, I had the feeling that if I waited long enough, it would call me back. And then, my phone rang. I nearly dropped it, my hands slick with sweat. It was an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered. I should have thrown my phone out the window. But I didn't. I hit the button, brought it to my ear, and immediately regretted it. Because I didn't hear a normal voice. I heard my own, not just any words. My voice from my last shift, a recording of myself talking to my boss. Yeah, everything's fine here. Just another quiet night. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my stomach twisting. The call ended. Then, another message. A photo. I didn't want to look. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. The security office. The chair. Me. Sitting there. Waiting. And then, below the picture, a single message. Come back. I don't know why I listened. I don't know what part of me made me turn the car around. But I did. And I went back. Not for the job. Not for my things. For one last time. To end it. The warehouse was different when I arrived. It was too quiet. No forklifts. No workers. Just stillness. Like the entire place was waiting. I stepped inside, and the door shut behind me. Not a slam. Not a gust of wind. A click. Like it had locked itself. I knew I should turn around. I knew I should run. But I didn't. I walked forward, straight toward the security office. The hallway felt longer, like the building was stretching itself, pulling me deeper inside. But I kept moving, and finally, I reached the door. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the handle and pushed it open. The room was dark. The monitors were on, filling the space with a cold, flickering glow. And in the chair, I was there, sitting, still, waiting. And when I stepped inside, the figure turned its head, not fast, not natural, like a machine learning how to move. It looked at me, and then, through the radio, it spoke. But this time, the voice wasn't distorted. It wasn't inhuman. It was calm, flat, like someone telling me something simple. You don't belong here. I swallowed, my throat dry. Who are you? I managed to whisper. It didn't answer right away. It just watched me. Then, after a long pause, neither do I. The air in the room grew heavier. The monitors flickered, distorting the figure's shape, but I could still see it. Still see me. I took a slow step back, but my legs felt weak. What do you want? I asked. The figure tilted its head. Then it said something that made my blood turn to ice. You're taking my place? I don't remember what happened next. I think I tried to move, tried to run, but my vision blurred. The lights flickered again, brighter this time, too bright, filling the room with a blinding white glow. A sharp, static noise rang in my ears. Then, darkness. I woke up to the sound of voices. Real voices. Human voices. I blinked, my head throbbing, my body stiff. I was on the floor. The security office was normal. The monitors were showing empty aisles, the break room, the entrance. No shadow. No figure. No me. A worker was standing over me, shaking my shoulder. Mark? Hey man, are you okay? I stared at him, disoriented, my heart pounding. The morning crew had arrived. The sun was up, and I was still here. I didn't say anything. I just got up, grabbed my things, and walked out. I didn't clock out. I didn't talk to anyone. I got in my car and drove, and I never looked back. This is where Mark's message ended. At first, it seemed like the story had a logical conclusion. He had experienced something terrifying, blacked out, and was found by the morning shift. He quit his job and walked away. It should have been over, but something about his last words didn't sit right with us. The way he described the figure speaking to him, the way he said, "You're taking my place," it felt unfinished. So we decided to go to the warehouse ourselves. When we arrived, everything looked normal. Workers were coming and going. Forklifts were moving boxes. But when we asked about Mark, things got strange. The people we spoke to barely remembered him. Some shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, the night guy. He just stopped showing up. No big deal. No investigation. No questions. Just like he had never really been there." We finally spoke with a new security guard, Mark's replacement. He was young, maybe in his mid-20s. At first, he seemed relaxed, just a guy who had taken an easy night job. But when we brought up Mark, his expression changed. He told us Mark had simply disappeared. He never officially quit, never sent an email, never answered a single call, just vanished. The management didn't bother chasing him down. They hired someone new and moved on. But then the guard hesitated, like there was something else he wanted to say. And when he did, we felt a chill run down our spines. A few nights into his new job, the guard found something in the security office. A photo. A printed photo of Mark. It wasn't left on the desk. It wasn't pinned to a wall. It was tucked away inside one of the drawers. Like someone had hidden it there. Like someone wanted him to find it. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe the last guy had left it behind. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But then, he started seeing things on the cameras. It started the same way Mark had described. A shadowy figure in the farthest corner of the warehouse. Unmoving. Featureless. always standing in the same place. But after a few nights, it got worse. The shadow moved. Not fast, not obvious, just a little closer every time. At first, he tried to ignore it. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe he was imagining things. Then, one night, he finally looked at its face, and his stomach dropped. Because the face wasn't empty anymore. It was familiar. The eyes, the mouth, the shape of the head. It looked just like Mark. When we heard this, we didn't know what to say. We stood there, frozen, letting his words sink in. If the figure looked like Mark, then who, or what, had walked out of this place that morning? Had Mark really escaped? Or had something else left in his place? We didn't know, and we didn't want to find out. Before we left, we only gave the new security guard one piece of advice. Run. Run before it got closer. Run before it learned his face. Run before he became the next replacement. We don't know if he listened, but if he didn't, then by now, someone else is sitting in that security office, watching the monitors, and waiting for the next guard to take their place.